Good morning. It's a real privilege and a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for inviting me. And I'll try and be quick. Now, my sermon is entitled My Journey with Jesus. And I want to start off by quoting 1 Corinthians 2 verse 9, because this kind of sums up everything that God does for us. And it says here that ear has not heard, eye has not seen, it hasn't entered into the heart of man the things that God has prepared for those who love him. And when I think about my journey with God, I never dreamed in a million years that where God would take me and what he took me through. And I know this verse also applies for us when we get to heaven. And again, we're just going to be blown away by what God has prepared. He's up there preparing for us, isn't he? And so I was not brought up a Christian. I didn't know anything about God growing up. And my dad owned his own bakery, and we as kids were expected to work in the bakery. So going through school, I didn't achieve much because I just thought, well, I'm going to go and work for Dad. And my dad owned and trained race horses, and every Saturday would see us at the races, and that was my life. And in my teenage years, as you do, I was invited by my school friends to a party. I didn't go to many parties because Dad wouldn't let me, and you didn't cross Dad. But this particular party, I don't even know how to describe it. My friends did this every Saturday night. That's the way they lived their life. And I can distinctly remember sitting there looking at all the stuff that was going on and thinking to myself, is this all there is to life? Do you know that question sent me on a journey? And I believe that question actually came from God. Because at that time, I met a boy, and he came from a Seventh-day Adventist family. And I'd never heard of them. I thought, oh, that's weird. And when he took me home to meet his family, they were all Adventists, and he had an auntie in particular who used to talk about God like he was her best friend. And I thought, oh, she's strange. But you know, the more this particular auntie stood out to me, and the more I got to know her, the more I wanted what she had. And it's funny how when I was asking this question, I met this family. And at that particular time, the Ashburton Seventh-day Adventist Church started an evangelistic series. Do you know how many evangelistic series there have been in Ashburton? It's rare. And right at this time, Pastor Austin Fletcher was coming down to Ashburton from Christchurch, taking these evangelistic series. And this auntie, she invited me along. I will never ever forget the first session. It was on Daniel 2. You know Daniel 2? The statue, gold, brass, silver, brass, iron, and we're living in the days of the iron and the clay that doesn't mix. And Daniel predicted history we look back now and see exactly how it has come to pass. Daniel was so right in everything that he predicted. I walked out of that first session absolutely convinced that there was a God. And I went to every other session, and at the end of it, I was only 18 years old. I gave my heart to Christ and joined the Seventh-day Adventist Church. That was the best decision I ever made, and I've never regretted that decision ever. But by this time, I was married. I was barely 17 when I got married, and I don't know why. I didn't really want to get married, but this Seventh-day Adventist guy was persistent, and he actually, because I was too young to sign the marriage certificate, he actually told my parents that I was pregnant. And in those days, if you were a mum, a solo mum, usually you'd have to give your baby away because it was a shame to have a baby. And I wasn't pregnant, but we got married. However, by the time I was 19, I did get pregnant, and at 7 months, he came along to me and he said, "I don't want to be a father," and he left. He left me to it. And on my 20th birthday, my little daughter was born. And she wasn't due on that day, but I believe that God did that especially for me, because he turned sorrow into absolute joy that this little girl was born on my birthday. And throughout the years, we have celebrated our birthdays together, and it's been so special. And I love it a bit. I tell her she's God's little gift to me, and I'm just so grateful to God for what he did at that particular time in my life. Now, when I was 22, and my little girl was 2, the Adventist pastor of our church suggested to me that I should go to Avondale College to upskill myself. Here I was, a solo mum, on the benefit, and he's suggesting that I go to Avondale. How was I going to afford to fly across to Australia and pay all those fees? But do you know what? Never underestimate God's plan for you. You know, eye has not seen, ear has not, it hasn't even entered into your heart what God has prepared for. I didn't even enter in my heart that this, what God was going to do for me. When I was 12 years old, my dad took out an investment in my name in a building society. It was to mature in 10 years. So when I was 22, just at the time when the pastor suggested that, Dad handed me all this money. Was that from God? Did he know at 12 years old, when I was 22, what kind of predicament I would be in? Of course he did. He prepared for that time. And so I went to Avondale. But another little problem arose, because with a 2-year-old, I couldn't go and be a student in the dorms. So where was I going to live? I was not going to leave my little girl behind and for my family to look after her. I loved her too much and I couldn't part with her, so she had to come with me. Well, do you think God had something else prepared for me? The same pastor who told me this, suggested this, knew a New Zealand couple that had gone over to Avondale a few years ago to take their children, 2 adult children, to put them through. They had stayed on at Avondale and they took in other students that couldn't go into the dorms. So he rang them and asked if I and my little girl could stay. Of course they said yes. And you know what? They became like my mum and dad. And they were so lovely to my little girl and looked after her while I went to study. And I was only going to be there for 1 year in Australia. And I was going to do the secretarial course. But again, God had other plans for me, and I actually ended up doing getting a diploma in the teaching. And, you know, like I said, when I was at school, I didn't bother about school because I didn't think that I could achieve. And when I got my diploma, it was, wow, you know, I can do this. Maths was a big issue for me. I still can't do maths. I'm ringing my daughter and Kerry saying, Amy, what's 33% off? You know, I'm in a shop looking at a dress, 33% off. She goes, oh, Mum. But I got extra tuition during that time and I passed the maths because I had to get my diploma. When I first went over to Avondale, I went in February. That was in the middle of their summer, and it's hot. It's hot day after day after day, and I'd come from this part of the world to the heat, and it was awful. And I missed my family so much. I was just so homesick. And every time I opened my mouth and my Kiwi accent came out, you know, I'd get teased by those Aussies. Don't get me wrong, I love Aussies and I got lots of Aussie friends, but this was my experience. And so one day, instead of going to class, I was walking around the college crying my eyes out, thinking, I have made a big mistake. I'm not enjoying being here. And, you know, a voice said to me, go to the library. And I'm going, go to the library? So I obeyed that, went to the library, sat down, what am I doing here? And beside me was a big shelf of books and pamphlets, and I picked up a pamphlet. And the pamphlet was... had this written on it that jumped out of me in Psalm 46 verse 10. Do you know what it says? Be still and know that I am God. And it was like God was saying to me, Robyn, calm down, be still. I'm your God. I brought you here and I'm going to look after you. And I'll never forget that moment. It changed me. And God spoke to my heart and gave me the courage to keep going. And my other lovely verse that I loved from that time was in Romans 8:35, which says, who can separate us from the love of God? And it goes on to say, for I am persuaded that neither life nor death, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any created things shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. And I learnt that firsthand. And I've gone on to be a social worker. I have worked in a home for sex abuse victims, very hard job. I spent 17 years working with prisoners and their families. And I would never, ever have thought that those were the kind of things that I would ever do in my life. I came back down here I lived in Auckland for 30 years. I came back down here to Ashburton when my mum wasn't well. I hadn't seen her for a long time, and I'm so glad I spent the last 4 years with her, and she died at 96. My family lived in Ashburton, and I've got an Adventist sister who came into the church because I, talked to her about God. And I am now working as a support worker for Access Community Health. I had to go back to study because I have to give people their medications and do nursey things now. Never wanted to be a nurse, but now I'm doing nursey things. And it just shows you, you've got no idea where God is going to lead you. And I'm ministering every day to people in their homes, and I love it. And I just want to finish off by saying this to you that I wrote down. I asked for strength that I might achieve. I was made weak that I might learn humbly to obey. I asked for health that I might do great things. I was given infirmity that I might do better things. I asked for riches that I might be happy, but I wasn't given riches that I might be wise. I asked for power that I might have the praise of all men, but I was given weakness that I might feel my need for God. I asked for things that I might enjoy life, but I was given life that I might enjoy all things. I got nothing I asked for, but I got everything I hoped for. Almost despite myself, my unspoken prayers were answered. I am among all people most richly blessed. Thank you.